Good morning, everyone. It's Dex here from A2K. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, MEP Fabrication Workflows in Revit. So we'll have Senior MEP Technical Consultant Brendan Upton presenting for us. So first, we'll just go through about A2K ourselves. We're all about fostering innovation through consulting and training. A2K Technologies plays a vital role in helping the infrastructure, building, mining, construction, architecture, and manufacturing industries reach their full potential by delivering complete technology solutions and support services such as education, consulting, and IT managed services. We're working with visionaries to shape the future of design and in turn enable them through innovation to minimize risks, improve productivities, and achieve excellence. A2K Technologies is considered the business partner of choice and trusted advisor by vendors and clients. We partner with major software and hardware vendors to meet the client's technology needs. We strive to exceed client expectations by understanding their challenges and delivering solutions through experience and innovation. We work with clients and companies of any size nationally and abroad. Over to you, Brendan.
Thanks very much, Dex. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. Thanks for spending your time to share this webinar this morning. So just a little bit about myself to begin with. So Brendan Upton is my name. I'm going to be your host for today. I'm the Senior MEP Technical Consultant here at A2K Technologies, and there's just a little bit about myself. Roughly 20 years experience in the MEP industry, authorised instructor for Autodesk, and I've been with A2K since 2013 as a technical consultant in this role. So my main focus is on multidiscipline BIM coordination and obviously around Revit, heavily around Revit and MEP implementation and training. And as part of the BIMPos initiative as well, which some of you may have heard of, may be aware of, we are the technical advisor for that for the last 10 years as well. All right, let's move on. So let me just quickly go through a quick agenda, what I'm hoping to cover today. So I just want to do a general overview of fabrication parts in Revit. The goal of this webinar is to be fairly high level. Okay, some of you on the call I know are fairly familiar with Revit parts, with fabrication parts in Revit. For those of you that are not, I'm hoping that you can get a bit out of this webinar and take away some tips and tricks. So I'll talk a little bit about the general overview of what it is. I want to talk a little bit about some new features, some very high level. I want to talk about loading in a database, because I know there's been some questions about how do you load in custom databases. So I just want to talk on that for a little bit, both default and then custom. And I'm going to bring in the BIMPos and show a little bit about the BIMPos fabrication database, which has been customized for the industry. And then I want to jump into a live demo and I'll show in practice some of those things that I'm going to be talking about next. And I'll also show just a few little general workflow tips and tricks. I also want to just have a quick look at the A2K Rev Tag add-on that complements some of these fabrication workflows in Revit, particularly how it applies to specifically the fabrication parts. And then I'll just talk a little bit about outcomes and some other items, and then we'll have some questions at the end. Okay, so hopefully we'll go for sort of half an hour to 40 minutes, no more than that. We'll try and keep it short. I know your time is important, so thanks again for joining us. All right, so I just wanted to start on this slide. Just to say that, I guess a little bit about the ecosystem of MEP and I guess kind of where it sits, where Autodesk sort of sits and where it ties into how you guys are obviously working with it in the field and what software you're using. So there's a fair few softwares on the screen there at the moment, but obviously the main ones that are probably, we're talking about when we're talking about the MEP industry is obviously going to be Revit, which is we're going to be talking about heavily today. And then you're going to obviously be using things like Navisworks to coordinate and collaborate. Okay, and then when it goes over into the detail and the fabrication side of the project, which I'm sure most of you people on the call are from, that's when we're getting into the fabrication products. And many of you, I'm sure, are legacy users of these fabrication products. Some of you may not be. Some of you may be maybe new to Revit, but also new to the fabrication products. Okay, so what I want to focus on today is how Autodesk has now incorporated the databases and the items, if you like, what we call the fabrication parts from these legacy fabrication programs or software over now into Revit, and then how it sort of ties in and how you can kind of then transfer it back and across and vice versa. Okay, so the other thing I just wanted to mention here as well was that in terms of the three core fabrication products being CAD MEP, EstMEP, and CamDuct. Okay, CAD MEP is still there in the mix on this slide here, and obviously there may be some of you using it out there still. Okay, and it's still, you know, it is still there in the mix, and it's still obviously part of the AEC collection. Okay, but what we're talking about now, and what I'm going to be going through today in terms of fabrication parts in Revit, Autodesk's roadmap is basically bringing that detail, that historically what that detail work you would have been doing in CAD MEP over into Revit, and essentially CAD MEP is not being developed any further. Okay, so for those of you that didn't know that, be aware that CAD MEP is not being developed any further. And if you have a look at, you know, some of the literature out there recently from Autodesk, and you know, some of these similar sort of diagrams that I've got in front of you, CAD MEP is not mentioned in the roadmap. It's Revit, and then it's EstMEP, and it's CamDuct. Okay, so that's a good indication that, okay, if you're not already looking at fabrication parts in Revit, you probably want to start looking at it, because that is the roadmap. That is where Autodesk is pushing it. That's where they're investing the work. And there's obviously still functionality, and there's still development to go. You know, it's coming incrementally over the last few years in Revit. But it's quite functional now. In our experience with, you know, Revit 20, and particularly Revit 2021 now, is that you can get quite a high level of detail out of the Revit drawing, as well as obviously having the advantages of having the model that you can transfer and export out to MAJ, and then go back to Est and Cam to start, you know, estimating, and then obviously building the ductwork or the pipework or the whatever it is tray, which I'm going to talk a little bit on. Okay, all right. So that's kind of, I guess, a broad level overview. Let me jump into the next slide, and it's a pretty basic slide, but basically just sort of hopefully hones in and on what I want to kind of just show today. So what do we, for those of you who don't know, what are we talking about? So the fabrication parts in Revit. This is the new, well, the last few versions of Revit, the new introduction, integration into Revit. Okay. Them bringing these fabrication parts. So this is the fabrication database of parts that has come from those core fabrication products. Okay, CAD, Est, and Cam. All right. So in Revit now, what you're looking at is in your general Revit interface, you can open up the new fabrication parts dialog. Okay, if you haven't before, and you can start to load in databases. Now, that's a very broad statement. There are obviously steps and processes. There's limitations, and you've got to know how you can load in and what you can and can't. And that's what I want to hopefully touch on a little bit today, because there are some things to be aware of. You know, like you can't load multiple databases in, and once one is in, you can't sort of unload it. And there's a few little sort of tips and tricks just to be aware of. And hopefully I can touch on a few of those today. And obviously, if you guys have got questions, you know, after this, you know, please reach out and we can go into more detail. Obviously, we have our team here. We can support the full detail of all the way through from Revit to the fab side. Okay, so please reach out. And further to that, even during this webinar, if you've got questions, please feel free to add some questions into the chat window in the webinar on your Zoom panel, and we'll try and leave some time at the end to answer some of those questions. Okay. All right, so let's keep moving forward. Now, one thing I want to touch on in Revit is in this webinar in Revit is the fabrication containment specifically, as well as the duct, obviously, but the containment, like this cable tray, is quite functional now as with the fabrication parts in Revit. So what I want to show when I go into the live demo is a little bit of the functionality and how they look graphically. You can see they look far superior to the out-of-the-box Revit cable tray. Okay, and we've been over the last couple of years heavily promoting the use of the fabrication cable tray, even if you do not need to fabricate, even if you're just in design, functionally and graphically, they work a lot better than the out of the box, traditional Revit cable tray. Okay, and I want to hopefully I can show you a little bit of that in the live demo when I go into it in a sec. Okay. All right, and then there's just a few more slides here just talking about some of the benefits that you can get if you, after this webinar, if you start to obviously go down the path of looking into getting into Revit and using the fabrication parts, okay, you can start to get benefits of being able to take that Revit model and convert it out to and export it out to a fabrication MAJ file that can then be shared back into SMEP. So this is a screenshot of SMEP that we're looking at here, but it's the same database of parts that is in you would be using in Revit if you're using those fab parts. So you can export it out. You can start to do your costing from basically bid to construction. Okay, and the next slide, I guess, just reiterating that point. You can export from Revit, which I'll show you how to a little bit later on, straight into EST for costing and procurement, and then obviously further off over into CAM to build the items. Okay. All right. Let's quickly touch on just a few more slides here. Let's just quickly touch on just some of the basic new functionality in terms of Revit, in terms of fabrication in Revit within Revit 2021. Okay. One of the main things that you'll notice that is different, if you have already been using it in Revit 2021, is the export, the extension for Revit extension for fabrication, which is the tool that allows you basically to export the Revit fabrication model out to that MAJ fabrication job file to take it out to the fab products, EST and CAM. Okay. So prior to Revit 21, or pre-Revit 2021, it was part of it was on the add-ins. It was an add-in that you had to install. In the first few iterations, you had to install separately. I think in 2018 and possibly, or I think 19 and 20, it came out of the box installed, but it was still part of the add-ins tab. And so it pretty much looked like this. You had to go to the add-ins tab, go to the Revit extension tool, and you could access then these import-export buttons for the MAJ files. Okay. Be aware that now in Revit 2021, it's now no longer in the add-ons tab. It's now basically embedded into the base program. So where you would find, other export and import features for other software, for other disciplines and other file types. Okay. So let me put that simply. So basically the MAJ export button is now directly under the files tab, under the export area here, with all of your other, typical ones that you'll be aware of when you go to export out to Navisworks or out to CAD format. Okay, it's on that list now. You have to scroll down. It sometimes can be a little bit hidden, but that's now where you find it. It is no longer on the add-ins tab in 2021. Okay, so if you're switching between versions of Revit, which many of you will be doing, obviously, for different projects, if you're in different versions of Revit, just be aware that if you're in 2021, it's a slightly different workflow here than in the previous versions of Revit. Okay, and in terms of also the import-export tool, that's just the export tool, right, under the file tab. In terms of the import tool, that is now found on the insert tab next to all of the other import buttons, like obviously bringing in other Revit files, but point clouds and PDFs and things like that. Okay, CAD files. It's alongside those tools now is where you'll find it. Okay, and you'll also find the export tool on the contextual ribbon as well, and all of the fabrication reports buttons are there as part of the contextual. So none of it is in the add-ins tab. Just be aware of that now in 2021. Okay. The other thing that just to quickly touch on in terms of the fabrication reports, just be aware that if you weren't already, that Revit has the ability to use and modify your existing fabrication reports in Revit. So there is a print reports button and report setup area now within those fabrication tools in Revit next to the export import tools, where you can start to get your worksheets and reports that you might be used to using in the fab products you can access most of those in Revit. Now, there may be some limitations there that you might find, but again, that's an area that, reach out, let us know. We can potentially help you with that if you need to set some stuff up in Revit, okay? All right, let me keep going. Okay, so one thing I want to touch on when I jump into the live demo in a sec is, because I know this has been a question, loading a custom database into Revit, okay? Now, there's obviously, there's a little bit involved, right? And it can be it's like anything, right? There's a few steps and there's things to be aware of. What I'm hoping to do in this demo is just touch on some tips and tricks, I guess, to be aware of the gotchas, I guess, if you're jumping in from scratch and you're trying to find your way around. Hopefully give you a bit of an idea, okay? So in terms of loading a custom database into Revit, when you load, when you install Revit now, with the fabrication features in it, if you don't have any of those core fabrication products installed, being SMEP or CAM duct, or even still CAD MEP, right? If you don't have any of those core fabrication products installed, you will not have access to the default out of the box imperial and metric databases that come with those products, okay? What happens with Revit is they have actually, that's what these ones here, Revit MEP imperial content and metric content, these are some sample databases that you will see. They ship those basically with Revit, I think almost since they introduced Fab into Revit, I think. So it's been a few years now, but it's a very sort of basic, default out of the box, and it's not even a full library. They're just samples, right? It's to get users to just get used to how to use the tool, all right? So you'll see those. Okay, if you've got one of those core fabrication products installed, you will at least get the depending on how you've installed it, you will at least get the default libraries, either imperial or metric, but you will also get any other databases that you have added in there as well. Here is that when you're in Revit, okay, you need to add a link. You need to use this add link feature in either EST or CAM or CAD MEP, right? You need to use this add link feature to add your database here, and then it will appear in Revit. If it is not being loaded through that add link through the core Fab product, you cannot have access it in Revit, okay? You won't see it on this list, okay? So that's the key. And a tip there is to say that, okay, if you're someone that doesn't have any of those, currently doesn't have any of those fabrication products, okay, but you do have the AEC collection, CAD MEP is still, I don't know how much longer it will be, I can't say that, but at the moment CAD MEP is still part of that AEC collections as far as I'm aware currently. So you can install that if you've got the AEC collection, and then you can access this similar sort of intro page here, and you can add a link and you can add that database, okay? So I'll show a little bit of that when we go into the demo, okay? And then this is just what the window looks like in Revit, where you can start to load and unload, okay? All right. Okay, so let me keep going, okay? This is what I also want to touch on as well, okay? So BIMPos is something that I'm going to heavily use in this demo. BIMPos is an industry initiative for developing standards basically for BIM essentially, but Revit MEP specifically, MEP industry specifically, right? For creating standardized parts, manufacturer specific items, Revit templates, all that sort of content, and also including a standard industry fabrication database. So there is a BIMPos fabrication database, which I'm going to be using in this live demo. And the key of that is that, if you're someone getting into this and you need to set stuff up, there's obviously, like any CAD type setup or BIM software type setup, okay, there's a fair bit involved. You can jump in and grab the out of the box stuff and it'll get you a certain point down the line, but at some point you're going to need to customize. You're going to need specific contents. You're going to need items that that function the way you need them to be. So the idea with the amongst many is with the BIMPos fabrication database is that a lot of that base work is done, and it's been done to industry standards, right? It's been QA'd, it's been workshopped, and continues to be, and it sits alongside the BIMPos Revit template. They talk you know, they sit sort of hand in hand, and there's workflows continually developing between the two. Okay, so all right, let me go to the next slide. Okay, just a quick one here, just to sort of mention, you know, if you're wanting to know more about BIMPos, okay, you can go to the website and you can see the specification documents, the PDF documents, all about the standard setups, you know, standard sizing, standard naming conventions, standard coloring between sort of Revit and between the Revit template and the fabrication parts. Okay, so you can get a bit of more of an understanding about what the content is, and you know, how is it customized, why, you know, what are the standards in there. Okay, those specification documents pretty much house all of that information. Okay, and once again, if you've got, you know, any more questions, obviously we can reach out, we can have a chat. Okay, all right, so let me jump into Revit now. So I'm just going to jump out of PowerPoint here. Okay. All right. So, first thing I want to look at is loading the database in, and just quickly giving a quick sort of quick little tutorial tips and tricks on what I was just speaking a couple of slides ago about the loading in, and how you can get a custom database in, and how you can then load it into Revit. Okay. So the first thing to be aware of in Revit with the fabrication parts is that you have this separate fabrication parts dialog that is accessible from the systems tab. Okay, so you've got the fabrication part button here. When you open that it's a dockable window. Okay, and then from here you can access the settings. Okay, now the thing to remember is that, okay, the first thing to remember is that each time you jump into this fabrication settings dialog at the moment in Revit, you have to click it'll be grayed out. It won't be kind of selectable. You have to click the reload configuration button, because it basically will reload any changes that it might have been made. It's just the way that it's managed, how it's work. If there are any changes that are being made to the database in the background, okay, you click on that reload configuration, and then it basically resyncs, if you like, resets it, and then you can access it. Okay, now if you already have some fabrication parts loaded into the current project you're in, you will not be able to unload those services. Okay, so if there's a service that's grey, like this BMA supply one here, you can see it's grayed out. If I click on that, I can't actually unload that because I have some content from that service already loaded into my Revit. Okay, whereas this containment one, I can unload because I don't have any. That's this one here. Okay, I can't load. I can unload that because I don't have anything in my project. Okay, so I can bring that back across. Okay, so just be aware of that. If you're trying to sort of unload some services, you have to make sure that there's no services in the project first of all, and you have to make sure that you have access to that database in your in the back end. Okay, and just to show you where that is, I'll just cancel that. I'm just going to jump into this other session that I've just got open here. Okay, so this is a blank session. I've got no fabrication parts in this project. If I go into the settings, okay, once again, I need to click the reload configuration, and that should activate it. Okay, so you can see they're all these are all the services that form part of that BMA, that BIMPos. This is the BIMPos customized industry database, fabrication database. Okay, I can select all of those services and I can unload them. And once I've done that, if I've got no loaded services, then I can jump back up the top here and I can access other configurations, other databases if I want to load them in. Okay, so the key is that you can only have one database loaded at a time. Okay, you can't have multiple. You can have multiple services from that one database loaded at a time, but you can't have multiple databases, multiple configurations. Okay, that's the other point to remember. All right. If you have a look at this list here, you can see, if you recall from my screenshot, and I'll show you in a second in this, but that's pretty much the list of the links that I've got at the moment in my in my fabrication. They're the databases that I've added. Okay, So if I jump quickly over into EST just to show you, I've got EST open here in the background. So this is EST, this is Fabrication EST MEP. Okay, Autodesk Fabrication EST MEP. This is that intro splash screen. This is where if I need to access another database in Revit, I need to click on this add link here first and browse to wherever the database is and add the folder here as a path. All right. Once it's in here as a path, I can obviously create new jobs from here and work in EST. But what it also means is in the background, it'll also set it up in Revit. So if you look at that list there, you see you've got, I've got my MEPos MEC elect database here. I've got those default ones, and I've also got those sample ones. That's the list that I'm seeing over in Revit, if you recall. Okay, so I jump back over to Revit here. I've unloaded. Now I click on here. That's what I can see. Okay, so I'm free to install any of these other databases if I want to. Okay, so that's just the first thing, just to touch on. Okay. So be aware of that sort of loading process. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Again, if you've got questions, we can certainly help you with this sort of setup stuff. Okay, all right. So the next thing, okay, and this is obviously where I guess coming back to the sort of the core question that I know was being asked, how do you load custom databases? That's pretty much how you would do it. You make sure it's cleaned out first. Right, and then you would load your custom one into your fabrication product, and then you will load that that into Revit through this window. Okay, now quick side note, I'm not going to go into this in any great detail, but some of you are probably aware that there has been word of a cloud database management tool that will be able to be worked through or used in conjunction with Revit without you having the need to have those fabrication products loaded, to edit the database, to load, to things like that. That's still on the roadmap with Autodesk. The heavy development is happening, but I can't give any dates or anything on when it's happening. So at the moment, what I'm showing here is currently the workflow, how you have to manage it. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's jump back into this other file I've got, and what I want to do here now is not get too sort of heavy, but just show you a few little sort of basic tips and tricks in terms of just functionality and workflow with the fabrication parts in Revit. Okay, okay, so if you've got, let me just draw a bit of Revit duct first of all, and I want to talk about the design to fabrication conversion. Okay, so if that's a bit of Revit duct work that I've got drawn there, okay, if I want to convert that to fabrication, so you can see this is Revit duct, okay, and then if I want to convert it to what these are, obviously the MEP Fabrication ductwork, so that's the category that the fabrication duct becomes in Revit. Okay, I do have this design to fabrication button. Okay, so what I can do is I can select that run, and obviously I'm going full live here, so hopefully this all works without a glitch. Okay, we'll see how we go. All right, so if I want to click on that, I can click on the design to fabrication. Okay, I can pick my database that I want, and I've only got that supply one loaded at the moment, but that's okay. What I'm expecting to get is a radius elbow here. Okay, so the reason for that, and there's a few little reasons, and there's a few different sort of workflows you can adopt. But what I can tell you is that if you've got, depending on how your database is set up in the background and the order of your the priority of your parts, this conversion is actually picking in for this service. It's picking the radius bend first because it's ahead of the square bend. Okay, so what you can effectively do is, if I just undo one step, if I actually access what's called the exclusions mode, okay, which is this button down here, I can actually switch that on, and I can actually exclude certain parts before I do the conversion. So I can actually go, right, I want to exclude that radius bend by crossing the box, set that up, so that's now resolved. Now if I go back and do the same step again, I can select that, and I can go design to fabrication, and I can convert that out, and that should then give me the square bend. Okay, now what you can then do is, with the fabrication parts in Revit, you can then optimize the length. So if you select the run, you've got the optimize lengths tool for, this is specifically for the fab parts in Revit, and that will cut the ductwork up into the specified lengths that are as per whatever that database is set to. Okay, so the database that this one's coming from, obviously this is the BIMPos fabrication database. It has an industry agreed length, standard length. Okay, and that's what it's going to. In Revit, you can, there are some, there's some limited ways that you can sort of edit this stuff. So it is, to a certain extent, editable, okay? But again, there are some workflows to be aware of here, and sometimes it can depend on how the database is set up as well, because sometimes some of this stuff can be locked out as well, okay? So yeah, don't sort of just assume that, yeah, you can just put whatever length you want. There are certain, factors involved there that you have to be aware of sometimes, okay? But effectively, the option can be there, okay, to change that length out, okay? All right, so that's the design to fabrication conversion, okay? Once you've converted it out, okay, let me show a couple of other things here. Now, sometimes when you convert out, you might get some gaps, okay? And this is 2021, you can see it's working fairly stably. It's fairly stable now. In the past couple of versions, there were some functionality hiccups sometimes when you were converting, and if you try to do too much, you'd get a gap and a hole, and then that's where a tool called route and fill would come in. And just to show a basic example of that, right? Actually, I might go to the 3D view here. We've probably been in the 2D view for a while. Let's change it up a bit. All right, so I've got a gap between these two bits here. Simply what I can do is I can select that one, and I can access the route and fill tool here up on the contextual ribbon, and that allows me to select the connector and select the connector, and then it gives me, can you see the, it depends where the screen is here. If I move it up a bit, you get little arrows here, but you also get them up here in the ribbon, okay? Same buttons really, and you can see it's got solution 1 of 5. So it'll actually give you some different solutions based on, your parts in that service, okay? So whatever service that is on, okay? So, you can change that around. And then once you select the one you want, you can go with that. Okay, so let's go with that one. Okay, then what I can do is I can tab select and optimize the lengths again. Okay, all right. So that's the route and fill tool in a very basic example of that. Okay. Okay, the other one to show you is, real quickly, is multi-point routing. Okay, so in terms of placing these, by default, when you're placing these elements in your model, let's go to the 3D view. When you're placing these models, these elements, these fabrication parts in your model, by default, it'll be the piece by piece, and you can use your arrow keys on your keyboard to switch directions and things like that, certain other keys. If you turn on the little tooltip tool, it'll generally show you, see spaces rotate, up arrow, toggle the connector. So you've got a few different hotkeys that you can use when you're working with this. So this is the default way you put it together piece by piece. Okay. If you prefer to, or if you would like to model more in, I guess, more of a Revit sort of routing method, you can access this multi-point routing button. Okay. So I'll show you what that does. What that allows you to do, if you activate that, okay, activate it. All right, what that allows you to do, well, let me start again. I'll probably start halfway through the escape. So you select the piece you want first, okay, then I can activate multi-point routing. Okay, so now that will let me draw from point to point. Okay, I'm not having to do piece by piece. I can basically draw from point to point. Let's just go like that, maybe. All right. And then you can do something like tab select and do the optimize lengths. Okay, so you've got options to do that as well. Okay, all right. Really quickly, I want to just quickly show the export tools, just really high level. Okay, just to give you a bit of an idea. Okay, so if I let's go and take, we'll go and take this one up here. Okay, see when I select it now, instead of having to go to the add-ins tab, it's up here on the contextual ribbon. Okay, so there's that export file. It's also, you can also access it from the file tab. As I said, you've got to drill down through here and you will find it here. Okay, it's installed out of the box now with Revit. It's embedded in the program. Okay, so again, that's another sign that tells you that they're, you know, heavily investing in this development in Revit. It's where everything's going. Okay, so the fab is here to stay in Revit. Okay, I guess you can have some, you can take that away if nothing else. Okay, so I want to export this out now. So I select it. I can say export to job file, and I simply just basically have to save it as an MAJ file. Okay, so I'll save it to my folder here, test MAJ. Close that. I don't want to get too sort of off sidetracked here, but basically now that that's an MAJ file, you can see there's the export there, .maj that I've just saved out. Okay, if I jump into EstMEP, okay, and I can basically open that job from there. Okay, now I don't want, as I said, I don't want to get sort of too code ready. This is something that, you know, we have the expertise here. You know, myself and Dave work quite closely together, so we can certainly support you know, these detailed and get down to the granular level of working with these core fabrication products. Okay, but in simple terms, I can say, right, I want to open that job. Okay, all right, it should just work. There's a couple of errors in there. Okay, and that's just because I don't have, as I said, I don't have mine set up properly, but basically you can see the parts have come in through here. Okay, and if I go to the 3D viewer, you can see basically where it's coming through. Okay, and you can start to do your estimation and whatnot. Okay, and you can see this is the same database as the BIMPos. So it is, in fact, it is the BIMPos database. Okay, so it's the same database that I'm using in Revit. Okay, to access these parts. Okay, so anyway, as I said, I don't want to get too sidetracked there. I'm not going to go through this webinar is not estimate workflows. Okay, just to show you that that's that process out. Okay, that's the export. That's the export process. Okay. All right. You also have, as I said, the import MAJ, so you can come back into Revit if you need to. Okay, so that is now found on the Insert tab, and just to show you that, that's where that button is now. So you can import the MAJ job. Okay. All right. Let me show you real quick a quick example of what I was talking about with the containment. The tray. So what I'll need to do is I'll need to load that in, because I believe I don't have that loaded in at the moment. Okay, so what I need to do, in fact, I do have one loaded there, but if I want, I'll just show you this again. If I wanted to, I'd have to reload the configuration. Okay, and then I can pick from the services from this database. I can pick whatever containment service I want. So you know, I could pick what's. Let me just put a few in there so you can see they come across. Click OK. All right, and I should then be able to access them through the menu here. Okay, so I can see there's my containment one. So I'll just go with the first one. All I really want to kind of show you here is I'll go to a 3D view. Okay, some of you might be you know, familiar or experienced with the, you know, the bugginess, if you like, of the Revit cable tray that's always kind of been there. You know, when you want to try and rise up a wall and turn corners and things like that, it turns on itself and it wants to rotate, and then you get disconnections, and it's a bit crazy. And graphically, it's not very, it doesn't look great, right? Whereas the fabrication tray now in Revit it functions really well. It functions well. It looks good too, right? Depending on what it is, whether it's, you know, ladder or whether it's tray, you know, and I guess more importantly, not just that it looks good. These are, you know, constructible, right? They're built to the actual products. All right, so that's probably the most important part of the puzzle, right? So what I wanted to show here is, let me go up to a bigger size. So let me just pick that one there. Okay, so real quick example, if I was to sort of want to go up a building, I'd put maybe a straight here, and I can do the multi-point routing, by the way, if I want to with this, but I won't do it for this example, but just be aware you do have that, just like I did with the ductwork, okay, if you want to draw point to point. But let's say I just want to go up a building, okay, and then I want to put a straight on, okay, so it's all nice, all connecting. Then I want to turn, let's say, to the right, so I'll hit my up arrow, that turns the bend there. Okay, I can then go along a wall, you know, something basically sideways now. You know, by this point in Revit, you'd be all over the shop with the Revit tray, right? It wouldn't be connecting, okay? Let's say I then want to, let's do this. Let's put this one up here, and we'll put a straight. And let's say this is going to be a pretty quick design, but just to sort of show you, let's say I wanted to put that sort of inside one there. Effectively, that's gone upside down, right? Which again, you'd never be able to do with, you know, with the Revit cable tray. Can you see how that's, you know, it's gone upside down? I can then put that straight on there, and it'll connect. I'll just keep going, right? I can basically build a roller coaster if I want. Okay, it's not going to break, right? It's robust, and it's graphically superior, and it's the real thing. So I guess it's got everything going for it, right? So just be aware that the tray in Revit works really well if that's something that you need to use. Okay. All right, the last thing I just want to quickly cover on this live demo, if I can do it relatively quickly, is I want to show a little bit of the Rev Tag tool that we've developed here at A2K to complement or to help you automate your, essentially, your tagging workflows. It does have some other tools in it as well, but in terms of the fabrication part, because it works with Revit duct and pipe as well, base duct and pipe. But in terms of fabrication, which is what we're focusing on today, what does the Rev Tag tool do for that? Mainly it's the tagging, okay? So some of you will have seen this before, but just to kind of give you guys that haven't seen it, basically what I can do is I can set up a configuration here. I can add multiple tags in. I can tell them where I want those tags to be positioned on each particular element. So this is this is the duct. This is a duct example, all right? So this is duct part. Item numbers, the length, and I've also got the radius as well, okay? Now, I've got, as well as being able to go center and bottom and right, I've also got X and Y offsets, which lets me sort of push and pull those items around and offset them and move those things, which I'll show you what I mean. So basically you can set up this, this database, you can add multiple families in, okay, and then we've also got the import and export feature, so you can actually save these configurations and actually import them into another project if you want to tag the same elements. All right, you don't have to sort of set this up each and every time. We implemented in, you know, in the latest version of Rev Tag, these import export configurations that allows you to do. And so what this simply allows you to do, right? If I save that, again, this is a fairly quick demo, but again, if you want a more detailed demo, we can certainly do that. But what it allows me to do is basically grab a whole sheet. So let's say this is a whole run. And I can basically say, well, I want to annotate that, which configuration do I want to use? Yeah, it's fabrication and it's that default one, okay? I can either pick by individual element, I can pick the run, start and finish, or we introduce this pick rectangle, which is quite quick. It allows you to basically select the run and it will tag those up, okay? Now, let's address a couple of things here, right? So the one I've picked obviously doesn't have a radius, so that is why that tag is not populating. So I'll do it in a sec with a radius bend. Also, the numbering I want to touch on as well. Okay, so let's maybe do this one because this will tie in with the numbering. All right, so I'll do the same thing again. Okay, so escape out of that. Let's go annotate rectangle. I'll grab that one there. Okay. Okay, so you can see the radius is populating now. Okay, now you can change the distance. You can move these around with those X and Y features. Okay, so you can adjust where they come. So you can see the item numbers I've put on the center, the length I've put bottom right. Okay, just as a really simple example. Now, if you then come across and do something, let's talk a little bit about the numbering for a sec. You can see there are some numbers here already that I've numbered. Some are empty. Okay, so let's quickly just do the numbering tool for a sec, because I wanted to show you just one little tip here. Okay, I'll press escape. If I go to the numbering tool for Rev Tag, I can say, right, I want to, let's start from 1. Okay, the prefix is going to be 02. Let's assume this is level 2. Okay, so the prefix is going to be 02. I'm going to start from 1. The padding is just how many zeros do you want? Okay, so I'll just have 3 zeros. And the parameter that I'm tagging, so the parameter that this number is part of for that part is the item number. Okay, so what you can do is I can run that again. So I can pick the run. Okay, and you can see that's now numbered every element. Okay, now what I want to show you here, the beauty is that you can keep doing that, rerun that all the time, right? Because let's say, for example, I do something like this. Let's say I grab that and I'm starting to value engineer this now, and I grab that, and let's say we bring that down to there. That gets rid of that tag. I've now obviously got a mismatch. I'm going from 8 to 10. All right, I'd need to reorder that. Well, all I do is just run the tool again. Okay, so annotate it. Sorry, not annotate. Number. It does remember the last number that it ended up on, so it will start from the next sequential number, or you can just reset it back to 0. So I'll just reset it back to 0 here, and I'll do this run again. Okay, so I'll pick the run. Okay, and you can see it's now renumbered the whole run, so that's going from 8 to 9. Okay, and along. Okay, so so they're the little sort of efficiencies and workflows that you can. Some of which there's a lot more in Rev Tag. Okay, and again we can show you now even things like, let's say you want to do the radius tags manually. Okay, let's say I want to use this 2-click button. This allows me to just do a one-off tag, but to position it at the same time, because most of you will know that when you use the out of the box tag with Revit, you click on the tag, it tags the element either just directly on top of it in the middle, or if it's got the leader on, you've got to place the leader somewhere and then turn the leader off. It's a clunky workflow, right? You got to tag it, then you got to come back, select it, then you got to reposition the tag manually. With this one, you can simply just go, right, I simply want to tag from that configuration. I want to grab the radius tag, right? And I want to tag that element. So click it first, and then I want to place the tag there. So it's basically 2 clicks. That's why it's called 2-click. Okay. So you select the element, and then you click where you want the tag to be placed. So it's just a little bit of a quicker, just saves a bit of time, less clicking, less mucking around, just saves you a little bit of time. So you can, we generally promote, using a combination, right? So you do your annotate button, you tag the majority of it, okay, get it all done, get the numbers working, and then you can clean up. So you're still a little bit of cleanup, but you're not going to, it's not going to be like out of the box where you're cleaning up all day, right? You just come back and you fix up the bits that you need to clean up, okay? So we believe it saves, a lot of time with this detailing if you need to detail, okay? All right, so that's just a little bit on Rev Tag. Obviously, this is if many of you still need to do. Obviously, you need to detail your work, and you need to create, shop drawings with a lot of detail on them. Okay, that's one path. Okay, obviously, just stepping back one sec there and going back to the workflow I just showed in terms of, coming from Revit here, exporting out to MAJ, going straight to Est and Cam with that MAJ file with the 3D file. That where hope, that the end goal is that to be the workflow. Okay, so it's going to avoid or you're going to be able to avoid having to do all this detailing work. Okay, potentially that's the end goal, right? So if you've got a manufacturer, a fabricator, I should say, that you're working with that uses CAM, okay, and can support that workflow, you can basically work in Revit, export it out, and potentially you can be shooting that MAJ file straight to them, and they can go straight to the machines. Okay, so anyway, that's just some food for thought. That's something that we continually, we continue to heavily promote, I should say. Okay, that's that workflow. Okay, so that's where it's going. That's the efficiencies, the time saving that these workflows are going to start to bring. Okay, and some of you, are going to be doing this already. For those of you that are not, or haven't even looked at Fab in Revit yet, this certainly is something that you could potentially start to investigate. I think in Revit 2021 particularly, the functionality is getting better. Okay, there is still more development to do. There are still some limitations, but it is getting quite good, we feel. Okay. All right. I'm going to jump back real quickly because I'm conscious of the time here now. Okay, I'm going to jump back real quickly into my slides. I just want to cover off on a couple more quick things here. and then we might have a quick couple of minutes for questions. Okay, so real quick, that's if any of you guys are interested in Rev Tag, reach out. You can do a 30-day trial. You can access it from the A2K Content Lounge. There's a link there. Okay, so ask us any questions. All good. Here's another thing I didn't want to go into this in this webinar in terms of a demo, but the Victolic tools for Revit is something that at the moment we are offering a complimentary license of to all fundamental course attendees, or all of our training course attendees. So that's a promotion and a partnership with Victolic that we've got on at the moment. Okay, and that's these slides sort of show there's some tools in that that allow you to do things like package manager and other third-party integration, as well as things like auto spooling, right, and getting into things like that. Okay, now this is you might, just to quickly sort of put this in place. Okay, this is something that is an add-on for Revit that allows you to, it gives you a lot of added functionality, particularly around obviously the Victolic products, right, as well as general editing in Revit. It's a lot cheaper, and obviously it's very cheap if you're going to get it, complimentary, right? It's a lot cheaper than some of the bigger packages that are out there to do things like the spooling and whatnot. It might be something that could get you into that field if you're a smaller company out there, right? You don't have a big budget. This could be an area that you could look at before you then go down the path in looking at the bigger solutions. Okay. So just be aware that there's some, even if it's just for editing, basically for pipe editing, that's some efficiencies that you can gain there as well. And then lastly, this is just a quick reminder for those of you who are not aware. We have the BIMPos Construction Innovation Forum coming up. Okay, obviously it's a virtual event this year. It's not going to be held at the Melbourne Convention Centre in person like it normally is each year. Okay, but it's a virtual event, and it's being held on the 7th and 8th of October. So you can register at CIF, Construction Innovation Forum, cif2020.com.au. If you haven't already, go and register. There's a good lineup of speakers there again for the 2 days, and there'll be some demonstrations and things like that as well. So yeah. And then otherwise, Dex, I think we're probably good to jump into some questions if there are any. Not sure whether any have come through.
Yep, there's a few come through here, Brendan. I'm not sure if you can see it. I'll just read it out to you.
Okay.
So Trevor Joy asked, how well does Revit handle the additional numbers of objects, such as the individual ducts and hangers?
How long does it handle them, did you say?
So he asked, how well does Revit handle the additional number of objects, such as the individual ducts and hangers?
I'm not aware of any sort of lag and certainly in our experience, there's no sort of known issues. It does handle it quite well. And I'm not aware of it sort of ballooning file size out or anything like that as such. So it's fairly robust. I would say that probably the first few versions of Revit where it came out, 17, even 18, it was limited, and there was probably some buggy things there, like anything. But in 2020 and now certainly 2021, it's quite robust, I would say, in my experience.
Yep. And Adam Ellis asked, can you show the reducing bend native Revit family being turned into the fab parts?
Look, we probably don't have time to show it today, but that definitely is something we can do as a demo potentially. So reach out to us and we can follow that up. I think maybe and we can do some more demos for sure, or answer this question if it is possible. Yeah, I think it's probably best. Yep,
and there's one more. What improvements are they going from 20 to 2021?
So there's a few fixes and things like that. You can look it up, the release notes for the fixes. Things like some of the main things like graphical display is a big thing. There are still a few limitations in there, don't get me wrong, but graphical display, you can use filters to a certain extent now in Revit. This is to change colors, set the colors and things, assign the colors and things on the different services, which you couldn't do in the first few iterations of Fab in Revit. So graphical styles, that area is developing. There are still a few little glitches here and there that they are fixing in terms of hidden lines under other elements as well, so it can sometimes be a little bit glitchy. as far as I'm aware. But yeah, the other newer features are the export, embedding the export tool in the program itself, and they're the main ones. But again, reach out and we can have a more detailed conversation.
Yep, and we also received some questions in the chat box. What are the limitations still with Fab in Revit?
What are okay? So there's a few, right? One of the main ones is probably in terms of the items that you have in your database. Some of that stuff is still not supported in Revit. So things like grills, air grills, and certain other items are still, you can see them there in the palette in Revit, but they're grayed out. So, and like flex duct, things like that. Okay, so there's still some limitations with some of those items. That's probably the main I can think of off the top of my head. And graphically as well, I'm aware that there are some graphical limitations still, even in 2021. Line work under showing hidden lines and things like that from fab parts under, like say access panels and things like that. There's some limitations there. I guess the other thing might not be a limitation as such, but the other thing, obviously, as I mentioned, to be aware of is that still at the moment, you do, if you want to be editing the database and you want to be, you can't edit that database essentially within Revit. You've still got to have one of those core fab products. Okay, but until this database manager, because cloud sort of, manager is released. Okay, that's still the way you have to do it. So just be aware of that as well.
Yep. So we just got a couple more minutes for more questions.
Sure. Oh, I can see a question. I can see a comment there from Craig Johnson as well, which is a very good point actually. In terms of loading the, which I didn't mention, but he's absolutely right. In terms of loading when I was showing loading the database, and it's version specific. Okay, so for Revit. So if you do it in EstMEP, 2020. That add link, it's only going to work for Revit 2020. That's a very good point. So just be aware of that as well. It is version specific. So you have to make sure you have the corresponding version of the Fab software, whether it's Est or CAM or CAD/MEP. You have to have the corresponding version to the Revit you're wanting it to show up in to add that link. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. But look, again, I sound like a broken record, but again, just come and reach out, ask us questions. We're happy to support you guys as much as we can.
Yep, and this one came through from Patful. So they asked, can everything that's been talked about be translated into working on facades, like numbering curtain walls, panels, and working out quantities for components?
That's a very good question. So in terms of these specific tools that I've been showing and like fab parts, no. Not as far as I'm aware of, no, not for facades, but we were actually looking with that Rev Tag. In terms of numbering, we did have some interest in actually, nothing is happening, so obviously I can't say, but we did have some interest obviously in that, being able to use that tool to number other elements in Revit, not just MEP products like doors and windows and as you say, facades or other, curtain walls and things perhaps as well. So nothing, I guess in short, no, not at the moment. These tools can't, but potentially could be.
Yep, and Trevor just asked, how is fire ducts handled?
How is fire ducts handled? Well, there is insulation specs in there. Again, I didn't go into too much of a granular detail, I guess. But there is, depending on how the Fab database is set up that you then bring into Revit, that configuration, you can bring those insulation specs in. I think that might answer the question if it's insulation specs and metal gauge. It's all kind of set up in the database. So again, look, that's something that we could go into a more granular discussion on and see exactly what needs to happen there, and then I guess make sure that it is actually possible. But it should be. Craig's put a kind of duct specification. Fire rating increases the metal gauge. So, but again, it's all in the database. You've got your metal gauges that you can set. And again, probably another point, again, just bring it back to the BIMPos database. This is the whole point of the BIMPos database, right? A lot of that base stuff is set up in there, right? And it's industry standard stuff. It's been set up to to have all that included. So instead of you guys having to do all of that setup, you can adopt the BIMPos fabrication database, and then you can complement that with your own specific shop needs or machine needs or what your own company needs, right? On top of that, but the base, it's all there and it's all industry standard and recognized to a certain extent, right? It can be trusted, I guess is the key.